Hi, everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the Delphi trial transcript read through Indiana versus Richard Allen in the homicides of Libby German and Abby Williams. This is the state's case, part 7, and we're continuing on with Indiana State Police Sergeant Jason Page. And we left off with his direct testimony ending, and they went on a break. And now we are coming back on the record from that break. I'm going to go cameraless just so you guys know this stream because I'm having a lot of hip pain today. But instead of not recording and trying to feel good and look like a human, I'd rather just lay down and record it and go cameraless so we have a video for you guys. So since it's audio really anyways, you're just listening to the transcript while I scroll through the documents. So let's get started here, shall we? We are on the record at 1:05 p.m. on whatever day this is. I don't remember. We're on like the second week of trial. Court says, okay, we are back on the record. Where is our witness? Where is Trooper Page? He's right here, Judge, says Mr. McClelland. Mr. Luttrell says, he's right here. The court says, okay, very good. Are you ready? Who's doing cross? Mr. Rosie? Okay, all right. Mr. McClelland said, did you want Trooper Page back up on the stand? The court says, well, at least like standing in front of that way. He won't have to. The bailiff says, all rise. The jury is now in the room at 1:07. The bailiff says, thank you. You may be seated. The court says, thank you, gentlemen. Trooper Page, if you'd resume the stand, please. I'm sorry, Sergeant. Mr. Rosie, you may proceed. Mr. Rosie says, thank you. Cross-examination begins. Trooper Page, you're aware that those girls were last seen on February 13th in a video on the bridge. That would be the bridge guy video. He says, yes. And that was in the afternoon hours? I believe so. I don't have a lot of information. And they were found on the 14th around noon. Is that your general understanding? Yes. And you don't have an opinion about when those two girls died because those two times, I'm sorry, you don't have an opinion of when those two girls died between those two times, do you? Can you restate the question? You don't have an opinion about the time of their death between those two bookends. My primary job was to document the information at the scene and not to form an opinion. Okay, so you don't have an opinion. No. And you've done, I'm assuming, a number of investigations in rural areas in Indiana. I have. And is it fair to say that in woods like this or, forest tracks like this, that there are scavengers around? Sometimes, yes. And one of those scavengers would be, let's say, a coyote? Yes. And there are other scavengers like raccoons and birds like buzzards, things like that, right? Yes. And those things that can sometimes tell you or provide you with information about the crime scene, can't they? In what way? Well, in terms of how quickly they may access a crime scene, if there's a body or something there that they're interested in, they can get to those things fairly quickly, right? Not necessarily. Okay, do you often use insects as a way to assist in making determinations about time of death? On occasions. Okay. Would it be reasonable to expect that a coroner or I should say a pathologist would take those things into consideration? If available, we've used entomologists on occasion. Okay. And so it's the same concept really, right? That, flies get to, bodies and things. It tells you something about timing, right? There are many variables involved. That's why I'm reluctant because it's not a yes or no. Okay, answer. It's just there's several variables. And maybe that answers the question. There's a lot of variables out there in that outdoor area that can determine or help determine when someone died, right? With time of death in general, there's just numerous variables that have to be taken into account. Okay. And in this case, taking into account whatever it is that you consumed while you were out there in terms of information, you can't generate an opinion about it. No. And in fact, you really don't have an opinion about anything that's interpretive about the crime scene, right? You're not really allowed to have an opinion. Is that fair? Correct. And that's part of the policy and protocol that exists with the state police and your job as a CSI. Yes. Okay, let's talk about crime scene integrity. Have you heard that phrase before? I have. Okay, and just generally, you're the expert here, but does it basically pertain to the idea that you're trying to maintain a crime scene in its most natural state so that there's essentially no taint? Correct. And is it fair to say that that's one of the big challenges that you have in the course of your business is trying to maintain that integrity from the beginning of the investigation until the end? It's one of our responsibilities, yes. And you've talked today about, hey, when I got there, the tape was already strewn across the wood lot and things of that nature. That's part of the process, right? Correct. Are you aware that there were some branches or breaches in the crime scene integrity in this case? Oh, I didn't know this. Breaches in the crime scene integrity? What? What do you mean? Well, have you ever heard that any of the information about what went down at the scene was leaked into the public early on in this case? Interesting. I don't have information about that. Okay, never heard that? I mean, I know that there's been claims, but I don't know specifics. I don't follow these cases in the news, so, well, fair enough. Are you aware of any information that would suggest that anyone took any photographs of those bodies and disseminated that early on in this case through means other than law enforcement? So someone potentially took photos of the crime scene and leaked them before the trial, before the whole Rosie and not Rosie, but before the whole Baldwin supposed crime scene leaks that took place, which I think that was a setup, honestly, to get him off the case. But I don't know. I can't be sure on that. But anyways, it's just very suspicious. And then you know that there's these other crime scene leaks going on, so it just makes you wonder. He asks, "Are you talking about the time?" Yes. Are you talking about now? When the girls were found? I don't have information on that. Okay, all right. Of that. You've never talked to any other officers in the investigation about any of that? I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, all right. Let's talk about, to be clear, just for follow up, you're talking about something that happened 7 years ago? Yes. Okay, 2017. Okay. Are you familiar with any circumstances in 2017 that involve, let's just, for example, say photographs of that crime scene being leaked into the public? No, I don't have any information about that. Or any information about the crime scene being leaked into the public. No, primarily I worked this case and then I worked onto my other cases. Okay, so the answer is no. No, right. Let's talk about DNA. Obviously, that's kind of a big ticket item in your business. Is DNA evidence One of those things that you take extra precautions to try and collect when you're at these scenes. It's one of the things we collect, yes. Okay, and in this particular case, I'm assuming that you did some swabs and other things of that nature, trying to collect as much as you could in that regard, right? I didn't collect any swabs. Okay, who would have done that? Brian Olahy, the lead investigator. Okay, you were primarily taking pictures, right? Correct. We've kind of established that before. That was your main job? Yes. All right. Let me just get to the point. Are you aware of any DNA evidence that was collected from this particular scene that in any way connects Mr. Allen to this scene or to this crime? I have very limited knowledge about any of the subsequent laboratory tests. I'm not aware of any. Okay. So basically, you're in your mind, as far as what you know, you're not aware of any. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. I have a timer set on my phone for dinner time for the dogs, and usually it's very quiet, and randomly I don't know how, but it turned itself all the way up to the top volume, and I haven't been able to shut it down, but I think I figured it out now. I don't know. Anyways, sorry about that. All right, so Rosie continues. Okay, so basically, you're in your mind, as far as what you know, you're not aware of any? No. Okay. You used an alternative light source, I believe, at this crime scene. Is that right? I did. And that light source, it's just another investigative tool that you use to try to find trace evidence. Correct. Okay. And I think we talked about this before, but just to kind of move things along, trace evidence would be things like semen or saliva or sweat or those kinds of things. Yes. Not blood, right? Blood would not be one of those. Well, blood under ALS absorbs light, so it appears darker. So, in some ways, it could be useful, but primarily we use it for bodily fluids or fibers or anything else that would fluoresce. So, kind of glow in the dark. Okay, and in the course of using that alternative light source, were you able to recover any trace evidence that you use or that you believe is material to this case? I didn't recover any evidence, but I know some evidence was recovered. Okay, but I'm talking about this trace evidence, semen, saliva, anything. Oh, I don't recall any stains. We looked at the scene twice, once when the bodies were in place, and then later looking at the area. I don't recall seeing any stains that fluoresced or anything of that nature. Really, because the girls they had saliva or some type of DNA on parts of their bodies, several parts of their bodies, and their clothing, and yeah. So, but this guy saw nothing that fluoresced in their black light. Okay. And do you have any knowledge of whether or not there was any type of like a R test kit done or anything like that on the victims in this case? I'm assuming they would have done that at the autopsies, but not something that you would have been involved with? No. Okay. I mean, sometimes you guys will go down and attend these autopsies, right? Yes, I did not attend any autopsy in this case. Uh, okay. That would have been Mr. Olahy, maybe. Yes, that might have been involved in that process. Correct. Okay. Earlier, we got a chance to look at some of the photos, and obviously, would you acknowledge that when you got to that crime scene, that there was some unique circumstances to the crime scene, especially as it relates to the sticks that were around the bodies? Specifically, what do you mean by unusual? Well, ever been to a crime scene like that where you saw sticks arranged on bodies like that? As we've spoken before, I've been to scenes where there's branches and sticks and objects on bodies, yes. Do you think that there was a particular significance to the way that those sticks were arranged, or the fact that that they were even there for that matter? It's something that we note and we document. Okay. You agree with me that those sticks were not placed there just coincidentally, right? It wasn't something Mother Nature did? Are you asking my opinion on this based upon? I'm asking if you agree with that conclusion. It appears that when you just look at the sequence of events, that the bodies would be there and then those sticks, the branches, were on top of them. That didn't answer the question. But there were some human acts that caused that, right? That would be reasonable. Okay. And with regard to those sticks, did you do anything in particular to try to recover any trace evidence from the sticks themselves? I didn't recover any items of evidence. Okay, you didn't collect any items of evidence. I did not. Yeah, I did not collect any items of evidence. Did you do anything in terms of examining those sticks to try and recover any trace evidence from the sticks? I recall examining the sticks, the limbs, and the items in that area, but I did not recover any items of evidence. Okay. And when you say you recall examining them, are you talking about with the ALS source? That and with white light and just visually and during daylight hours. Okay. Remember, they did not collect some of these sticks and things that any normal person with any common sense would realize they're part of a crime scene, yet these cops didn't collect them until later, like weeks later, if I recall correctly. Okay, would you have actually picked those sticks up and moved them over or turned them over when you were doing what you said you were doing with the white light and the ALS? Yes. So he touched the evidence. Hopefully he had gloves on, I would assume. Okay, and even the larger branch then? Yes. Okay, and you didn't find anything of significance? No. These branches, okay, they should have been, okay. He says no. I'll just leave it at that. He says no, there was no, and there was nothing of significance. Let's talk about the clothing. Abby Williams was the only victim that was clothed, right? Correct. And there was some testimony earlier about the condition of her clothing in terms of whether or not it was damp. Do you remember talking about that? I do. And your recollection is that you recall her seeming kind of damp, but you don't have a great recollection about what happened 7 years ago at this point, right? Correct. And apparently, looking back at the photos was not helpful in you recovering any of what you know now you remember from back in 2017, correct? That's accurate, yes. Okay, and would you agree with me that there was nowhere on those clothes where there appears to be like an obvious water line or anything like that where we can discern that, hey, somebody was in the water up to their thighs? Well, I've looked at primarily my photographs, but it could be in some of the photographs I examined for that. But after sitting here today, you don't have any recollection? I don't have any direct recollection. It seems like something I've seen. It seems like something I've seen. This is literally someone's life on the line, a defendant's life on a line, and oh, I think I saw that somewhere. Yeah, seems like something I might have seen, or maybe the prosecutor put that idea in your mind. I don't know. Did you generate any kind of or secure any kind of weather report from February 13th of 2017 or February 14th? Personally, I have not. Is that something you've done as a crime scene tech in the past? Gone back and maybe gone to the National Weather Service and tried to find some report to help you make a determination about the external factors at the scene? Mostly to document for my notes, and I have done that in this case just out of curiosity. I was trying to, but it wasn't for this report or anything official. Okay. Do you know anything about what the temperatures were on those 2 days? What I looked up is that it was approximately 57 degrees at the high and 34 degrees at the low, but I just looked that up on my phone to refresh my memory of the temperature. So he didn't have a he didn't remember that off the top of his head. He had to look it up. Okay. Do you remember the high being higher on the 14th than it was on the 13th? I can't remember. Okay. When did you do that? Do what? When did you look up the weather that you were just telling me about? Just a couple days ago. Okay, so just recently. Yeah. Were you a part of any circumstance where somebody went out into that creek, Deer Creek, and took any measurements in terms of the depth of that creek? No. Why did you not do that? I had my responsibilities that I was doing, and the dive team and everybody else had their jobs to do. That wasn't one of my assignments. Did anybody do that? That's my question. I don't know. I'm assuming no. Okay. Are you aware of any information that exists in that regard that you've seen? That I've seen? No. Okay. There were some shoe impressions that were photographed at various places around the scene. Is that right? Correct. And if I recall, maybe even some impressions from the south side of the creek. That's yes. Okay. And you were one of the people that photographed those impressions, right? Yes, I took supplementary photographs of them, yes. Okay, and if I recall, a couple of those impressions were along the kind of along the north side of the creek, along the bank area. Is that right? Yes, on the cemetery side. Yes, yes. Okay, and which would be the same side that the girls were on, right? Correct. Okay, and were you able to do anything with those impressions that assisted you in making any kind of positive identifications about the kind of shoe that was worn or how big a foot size was or anything like that? My understanding is I was providing supplementary photography, and what happened after I documented them, I don't know what happened to those. So you don't know if there were any results generated from that. I do not. So this could have been a potential lead if this was a footprint that was neither of the girls. This could have been a lead. They didn't do anything with it though. So is that something that you would do as a crime scene tech from time to time? Take shoe imprints to try to develop those and determine whether or not there was any meaning to those? Well, it depends upon the cases and the circumstances. Again, as I've worked hundreds of cases. If I'm the lead and I'm doing something, if it's relevant with the particular circumstances, yes, and sometimes no. Okay. You think would have been relevant in a case like this, if that to do something like that? Do you think it was relevant to do something like that? I don't know because I was primarily assisting with this case. I provided the documentation and then I submitted the information that I collected. He's like, I did my job. I was told to take photos. I did it. I gave them the photos, and then that was it. I washed my hands of this. I have nothing more to do with it. That's basically what he's trying to get at. Even though he is like tech, a crime scene tech guy, he's a CSI guy. So why was he not doing things like saying, "Hey, uh, Brian Lee, Olahi, there's a footprint here. Maybe we could do a cast or something." Like why wasn't he doing that? If he was the CSI guy, shouldn't he have been documenting those things and recommending more testing or whatnot? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's just wild to think that. Okay, so you think it would have been relevant in a case like this to do something like that? I don't know because I was primarily assisting, blah, blah, blah. Okay, is it your understanding that before you got there around, I think you said around 2 o'clock on the 14th, is that right? Let me make sure my time frames are right. I checked the crime scene log before my testimony. I logged into the crime scene log at 1:51 p.m. So it would have to be I probably arrived closer to 1:20, 1:30 at some point. Okay. Because the log only indicates the time where we finally go in to make our first approach. So you might have been at the cemetery 10 or 15 minutes earlier? Correct. All right. But that was on the 14th, right? Yes. And was it your understanding that there had been a number of people down in that particular area where the girls were found prior to you getting there? I was told there were searchers and people in the area, yes. And were you also of the belief that there were people possibly in that area even on the 13th? I believe so, yes. Okay, so there was a particular photograph that contained some blood on a tree. And I'm just kind of sifting through. It was photograph number 52. I don't know if we can pull it up. We have the map here. Do you remember taking this particular photograph of the blood on the tree? I do. Okay, and do you agree that we've kind of commonly referred to this as the F tree? That term has been used. Okay, and that's the reason is because is that this image on here, the pattern on here, kind of resembles an F, right? I think that's why people refer to it like that. I refer to it as a blood stain. All right, well, and that's the business you're in, right? Correct. Being very objective about these things, right? Yes, I try to, yes. That stain on the tree has drawn some particular attention has drawn some particular attention though from your crime scene team, right? So I guess the crime scene team thought that there was something significant about that stain. I've been told, yes. Okay, and one of the reasons why it's gotten some particular attention is because we've kind of called that into question, right? Correct. The fact that it seems to be something that may have been intentional, right? I've heard that. Yes. This is really like he's got to walk a fine line here because they can't talk about Odinism, they can't talk about runes, they can't talk about the things that they really need to talk about for their case. So he's like, well, it was intentional, right? This F looking thing without trying to explain that it looks like a rune. In other words, not just some random blood spatter, correct? That's my understanding. Okay. And at some point, my understanding is that you actually made a recommendation that the state maybe retain a blood spatter expert to take a look at that and to try to come up with an explanation for how that got there. Yes, that's true. So this particular witness was like, something's fishy about that, and maybe we might want to look at that a little bit closer. Mr. Luttrell says, objection to the, well, I'll withdraw the objection, Your Honor. Mr. Rosie says, thank you. And that occurred just more recently, right? This year? Yes, this year. Approximately, when did you make that recommendation? I don't recall. It was sometime spring or earlier in the year, before the deposition, I believe. Okay, that I had with you. So now we know Mr. Rosie did a deposition with this witness, Sergeant Jason Page, about this topic. And generally, you suggested that to get an individual by the name of Pat Cicero up in Laporte involved, right? That is correct. And Mr. Cicero followed up and spent a bunch of time working on taking a look at that image and going down to the crime scene and just doing some work to try to draw some conclusions about how that image got there, right? That is my understanding, yes. Did you have any other involvement in that process? No, other than recommending him. Let me back up. I digress for just a second. We are talking about DNA earlier. Do you recall that? Yes. How hard is it for your laboratory to go get DNA, to take a DNA sample and have that analyzed at a laboratory? Is that a pretty easy thing to do? What do you mean? Well, if you are able to collect some saliva off of a limb or a piece of clothing, how hard is it for you, or how much time does it take for you to get that to a laboratory and have that tested? How much time? Yeah. It takes to transport it? Yeah. Is it something you can get done in a day or a week, or does it take 5 years? Great question. Normally, for me, if I had evidence and one of the detectives requested that something be sent in, I would make arrangements with the lab and then we would transport it. I mean, it varies if it and how long it would take. Okay. For example, the hair that was in Abby Williams' hand. You know what I'm talking about? I've heard of that. Did he not take a photo of it? Yeah. Uh, for you to collect that piece of evidence and to process that from crime scene to a laboratory takes what? A couple of days? It's if there's a request. I mean, that's all I can say. If you're the lead investigator and you ask me to test something, I would send it off to the lab and I'd make arrangements for that, but it's based upon a request. Most of the evidence that we collect in most of our cases never get examined or analyzed. We keep it for storage pending any future analysis. So he just basically admitted most of the stuff we collect just doesn't get used. Okay. I mean, I understand that you're going to collect a lot of pieces and some things may or may not lead you to other paths, but it's wild to me that you would collect evidence and important key pieces of evidence like a hair in one of the victim's hands and not test it until trial begins, which is what has happened in this case. Um, all right. I forgot what question I was on. But the in the case like there where we have this hair, a couple of days to get it to the lab, it could. Yeah. Okay. Well, is there any reason why it would take longer? You're asking me questions that are outside of my knowledge base because in this particular case, I don't have the involvement that it would take to know all these things that you're asking me. Okay. Have you ever submitted a piece of evidence to a laboratory in the course of your employment with the state police? I mean, yeah, duh, you're a CSI expert. We're using you as an expert, buddy. Tell us your expertise. He says yes. All right. And have you ever submitted a piece of evidence that was related to DNA or potential DNA? Yes. Okay. How long does that take? Sometimes it took a couple of weeks or whatever. I mean, it's sometimes we might have something that would be a rush. I rarely have cases that would be a rush. So the lab would prioritize things for you from time to time if you ask them to. Yes, they can. Yes. So you do know that much. Yes. All right. And so let's just say, for example, with this piece of hair, what would your expectation be about how long it would take for them to turn that result over at the lab and give you some explanation? I don't know. Once I give it to the lab, I mean, what they do with it, I don't know. I don't know all their processes immediately. I mean, and I don't work out a regional lab. I work out of our post doesn't really have a laboratory. We call it a lab, but I'm not as familiar with all their latest technology and techniques. I collect items, I submit items, I'll transport them, but as far as the turnaround time and all that goes, I don't work out of the regional lab and I don't fully run or I don't really run in those circles. Okay, well, you used to run in those circles, right? You were a detective at one point. I was a detective, but my whole career has been at the Peru post. Okay. I mean, I don't spend time in the laboratory, so you'd have to ask a lab analyst how long it takes for them to turn around and write reports and have it peer reviewed. I mean, That's something I would defer to an analyst. Couple of weeks sound reasonable? Maybe a month? It could be. I mean, sometimes when you have autopsies to get toxicology, it takes a month or two. I mean, frequently, I will have detectives asking why it takes so long. It's just sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not. I have no control over that. Okay. So, but you're aware that you can prioritize these things if you want to get them done. On occasions, yes. May I approach, Judge? She says, you may. Let me hand you what I've marked. I haven't marked. Ms. Williams over here has marked exhibits E through L. If you just take a quick look at those and let me know when you're done looking at those. I'm finished. Finished? And you recognize those photographs? I do. And are those photographs from the crime scene? They are. And are those photographs that you took, or at least you or one of your fellow crime scene techs took? Yes. One or two of them might be mine, but the rest of them are another individual. Okay. And you agree that those photographs fairly and accurately depict the conditions that existed at the time that they were taken? I believe so, yes. Is this most likely on February 14th of 2017? Yes, because the presence of the girls' bodies, that would be on the 14th. Yes. Move to admit E through L. Defendant's exhibits E through L are offered. The court says, did you show them to him? Rosie says, yeah, he's seen them. Ms. Diener says, do you have a copy for us? Mr. Rosie says, I do. Mr. Littrell says, oh, I'm sorry, you're waiting on me. Mr. Rosie says, we're waiting on you, Jim. He says, I apologize. Yeah, I have no objection. Court says, all right, without objection, E through L inclusive are admitted. Mr. Luttrell says, what were those letters again, Judge? Wow, way to pay attention. You're supposed to be paying attention. This is your witness, but whatever. Mr. Rosie says the court says E through L. Mr. Luttrell says, thank you, my apologies. Mr. Rosie moves to publish them, and they are published. The court says, you may proceed, Mr. Rosie. He says, thank you, Judge. Trooper Page, let me direct your attention to Exhibit E, which is the first one in the packet. See that there on the screen? Yes. Just fine without coming up here? Yes. This is a photograph that you're familiar with, right? Yes. And just tell the jury, what's the significance of this particular photograph? Why was it taken? Why are you focused on there? I believe this photograph was taken during an ALS examination where Brian Olahy and I had our alternative light sources and we were wearing orange goggles, and those filter out certain wavelengths of light. But I believe Dwayne Datsman did not have those goggles and he thought he saw something shiny on the ground when the blue light, for him, the light would have looked blue passed over that area. So we looked at that area, and the shiny object was a cartridge. So this is how they supposedly find the cartridge in the blue light. All right, so just in particular here, if I could direct your attention here to the center of the screen, there's a little bare spot of dirt. Isn't that right? I believe so. In middle of that there's a cartridge. Is that what you're talking about? It's difficult for me to see, but I think so, yes. And so, with regard to that cartridge, did you take some more photos of it? I didn't take any photos. You're the photo dude, and you didn't take photos. You supposedly found a piece of ammo that supposedly was used in the crime by the supposed perpetrator, and you're trying to tie it to Richard Allen, and yet you didn't take any photos. Got it. Okay. So you did not? I did not. Okay, who took the photos of the cartridge? I don't recall. So you don't know. No, I was holding my ALS and I did not have a camera on me. Okay. So in the course of your investigation as a photographer, the primary photographer in this case, you did not take any photos of that bullet on the ground? I disagree that I was the primary photographer. I was a supplementary. Okay, well, photographer. But at the time, I was using my ALS and I didn't have my camera. So, okay, how many pictures you think you took out there? Hundreds. You just didn't take any of this bullet, the supposed bullet that was used to lure the girls down to their demise? That bullet? You didn't take any pictures of this bullet? There's a lot of activities that at certain times I didn't photograph. Okay. Just directing your attention to Exhibit F, just another shot, right? Just a little bit more close than the first one? Correct. Okay. Again, you didn't take this photo, right? I did not. Mr. Rosie says Max G. G, just another shot of the bullet, right? Correct. And just that rifle through these, and let's just rifle through these really quick. H, please. Yes. Some for inaudible, another inaudible there, right? And he says yes to the inaudible. And then this is a photograph that appears to be taken maybe when it was a little darker. Would you agree there's a reflection there or maybe a flashlight on the left there? Yes. When we used our ALS, the sun set, the sun had gone down and it was dark, so we could use the ALS, so we were using flashlights. Okay. And then J, just kind of a different angle. Same situation. The cartridge is in the middle there, right? I believe so, yes. And then this is the kind of larger panoramic view of the scene. Would you generally, just to help the jury, would you generally agree that the area that we're talking about is over kind of in this area just off of Libby's right ankle, basically, on the other side of this twig or stick? Correct. Okay. And so, is this more of what the circumstances looked like in their natural state before the bullet was exposed? The cartridge was exposed, I should say. I believe so, yes. So, in other words, when that cartridge was first seen by, you said it was Mr. Datzman? Correct. It was in his natural state. It was in its natural state. In other words, as far as you know, the ground around it had not been disturbed. As far as I know. Okay. But the pictures that we saw previous to this, where there's a bare spot and you could see the dirt around the cartridge, that's after the cartridge, the area around the cartridge was cleared, right? I believe so. Did you do that? Did you clear it away or did I did not? Okay. Did you see anybody do that? I don't recall. It could have been Dwayne Datzman. It could have been Brian Olahy. I mean, if Dwayne Datzman saw something shiny, he might have been the one to look at it. You would have to ask him. You don't remember who did it? I just remembered I was looking in certain areas, and during our search, Dwayne said he saw something shiny on the ground. So Dwayne saw it. Nobody else. Um, I don't know. This whole bullet is just fishy. The way that it was collected, the way that there's no photographs of it being collected, the whole thing is fishy. If this guy is the main photographer, although he doesn't say he's the primary photographer, but he pretty much is because he did all the photos. Um, why did he not take photos of it at the time when they found it? Why would they not be in order of his role? His film would be in order of where they were in the process here, and it would have been in the middle of his film, you would think. But no. He didn't have his camera, but he had the light, which isn't the whole point of the light to see things that with the camera and to take pictures with the camera. So I'm very confused by this whole thing and it's just it's not lining up for me personally. Either you noted in one of the photographs, one of them in Mr. Luttrell's exhibits, there was a bare spot. Actually, it was in your diagram, right? There was a bare spot that you took note of. Correct. And it was a little larger than this particular spot where this cartridge was recovered, right? Yes. I believe it was a few feet farther down. It could be off. I can't tell if it's in the frame or out of the frame on the top edge. Maybe up here? It could be. And so, but this particular case, as far as where the cartridge was, there was no bare spot there. No, it was created. This is what it looked like, yes. Okay. It would have been likely, at least recovered, to find out that it what is shining on the ground. It would have been likely, at least recovered, to find out what is shining on the ground. Okay. So he's just saying it would be picked up to see what it was. Very good. So the next image, please. And so this is a close up, basically, of that particular area, right? Yes. And just to help here, and direct me if I'm wrong, but where generally it'll be kind of in this area right here where the people photograph or the other photograph would have demonstrated that that cartridge case was before the ground was disturbed around it. Yes, it's in that general area. I'm using the her right leg and ankle as a landmark and that branch, but at the time that that was located, I don't know if they might have moved the branch slightly when they're looking to find out what is shiny on the ground. Okay. Did you get a chance to visually inspect the cartridge yourself? I can't remember. I mean, I didn't collect it. I didn't touch it. I don't have a memory of that. Okay. Would you agree with me, just looking at the photos, for those people that don't know much about cartridges and bullets, that kind of the business end, if you will, the end of that has the projectile on its facing down into the ground, basically. I would have to see a close up of the photograph again. Okay, if you want to step up here and take a look. So, this is one of the earlier images where we had a close up. It's difficult for me to tell how much it's nose down, how much it's that's the angle, and if that's just the head stamp is in the ridge. I mean, it's you can see it's a cartridge case. Okay. This is but just to help the jury, this is the end that has the primer or the firing pin, right? Correct. The bullet would be on the other end then. Correct. That's the primer, and then the writing on the outside is on the head stamp. And so it's if you were just generally talking about bullets, that kind of facing down or at least at an angle, I assume, right? It's kind of facing down. That's fair. Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Luttrell says, for the record, I believe that was Exhibit F. Do you agree? Mr. Rosie says, might be G actually. It's after G. I can't tell. These aren't numbered. Think it's number 4? Mr. Luttrell says, yeah, it may be G. Mr. Auger says G. Mr. Rosie says, what's that? G. G? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jim. It was G. Mr. Rosie says G. Yeah, okay. That was comical. Have you seen any photos of that cartridge case as it was being lifted from the ground? Have you seen those with your two eyes? Being lifted? No, no. Have you seen any photos of that cartridge case in any other circumstance other than basically right there in the ground as the leaves are moving around it? No. Like, for example, on a table somewhere or in in a lab or in your evidence locker, anything like that. Those are not my responsibilities. I was present when that was located and that happens afterwards. I have no knowledge. Okay. Well, did you review the photographs at least that you took before you came in here today to testify? I did, and I have seen these photographs in the past. Okay, yeah, I mean, they're part of the larger investigation, right? These photos? Correct. I'll kind of go into to determine who took what, basically had some familiarity with what. So, in reviewing all those photos, have you ever seen a photo of that cartridge right there? The one on in the ground, in any other position other than that? I've really only reviewed the ground zero basic, the first scene photos. Okay. Well, are there any in those? I have not. There are hundreds and hundreds of them, right? I don't recall. Well, how many photos do you think there are in total? Yourself and Olahi and Mr. Datsman took. Are you talking about during the first few days? Yeah, or in total. Well, give us some idea during the first couple days. I never counted them. I'd say there's hundreds. Okay. All right. If you were in charge of this particular scene, if you were Mr. Olahi, well, let me ask in this way. Have you ever been in charge of evidence processing at a crime scene? Yes. And where you were calling the shots? You were calling the shots? Yes. Okay. That's what Mr. Olahi was doing in this case, right? Yes. Well, it was a group effort, but he's the lead, so he's collecting the evidence. You got to have one chief and you have some Indians, right? I guess. Okay. In the context of being in his position, would you have recommended that that cartridge be lifted and photographs taken of it as it's being removed out of the ground and in different stages? No. Okay. Would you have recommended that some video be taken of that cartridge as it's being removed? No. Would you have grabbed the cartridge with your hand with gloves on or some tool? After photographing it, I mean, it's totally our discretion how we photograph it and how many pictures we take of it. It's one of many other items that were collected. I would photograph it and then you'd pick it up with often a gloved hand and put it in a pill box and then submit it as evidence. Would you have recommended that that cartridge be pulled from the ground and placed in the palm of your gloved hand and then photographed? No. In the palm of your gloved hand? I would not. Cartridges like that can have marks on them, can they not? Yes. Unique marks, right? Yes. Marks that can become critical in cases like this, right? Yes. It's in terms of making determinations about where the rounds came from or what gun it was cycled through. Yes. Okay. And so, in that respect, it would make sense to take a photo of that cartridge in its state as it was lifted from the ground, because it would be helpful in seeing some of those marks, right? We collect the evidence. We never photograph things in our hands. We try to have in these pictures you'll see there's some shoes and it happens. We try not to have our feet, our hands. I've never taken evidence, and at least I try not to have any evidence in my hand that I'm photographing. I think that's unprofessional. We would photograph them in the scene. Sometimes, if time allows, we'll take more detailed photographs, but any of those details that you're talking about would be done in a laboratory with a microscope. Well, that assumes it's submitted to a laboratory, right? So was it not even submitted right away? That's interesting. Yes. If, well, you're not making those decisions. I am not. So you can't just assume that it's going to be submitted to the laboratory, right? If you were to take the photographs that you are talking about, that would happen to get that detail. We don't have the lenses. I mean, I can show some of it, but not for a comparison. I don't have that technology. You would have to have a microscope to do that. Is it unreasonable for me to expect that that particular cartridge case would have been pulled from the ground and set on a table and a photograph would have been taken of the whole round, the cartridge? Yes. Is that unreasonable? Yes. I mean, it's not necessary. There's no requirements. If somebody chooses to photograph it on a table, they could, but I guess, I don't understand what the purpose of. Well, to get the markings, duh. Taking it on the table. What if this what if the side of the that cartridge was damaged? What if it had a paint mark on it or a dent in it? Might that be significant in a case like this? It could be. Well, wouldn't it be good to document those things by a photograph? I believe that the item was documented in that state, right? Yes. How hard would it be for an evidence technician to take a cartridge like that, pull it out of the ground, set it on a table, and take a picture of it? How hard is that? It wouldn't be difficult, but there's no requirement that we do so. It's very seldom do I take. A lot of times when I collect evidence at a scene, like a police action shooting, I photograph it. There's a lot of other work to do. You package it and you submit it. If there happens to be some time, occasionally, I will take pictures like that, but there's no requirement to do such. I mean, am I mistaken in thinking that that particular cartridge in that location under these circumstances could be pretty critical in this case in terms of the crime scene? How this affects the case is not my interest. My job and our jobs at the scene is to collect items of evidence. At the time, we don't know if something's significant or insignificant. Anything that we see that could have potential to be evidence, we photograph them in place and we collect them as items of evidence. Well, there's a concept called the chain of custody, right? Correct. And that's a very material or substantive aspect of crime scene processing, isn't it? Yes. And basically, just to kind of get to the heart of the matter, that is that the idea that you take an item, for example, this cartridge, from its natural state, and you document every phase of that item's journey to an evidence locker, right? Correct. And even from the evidence locker to a laboratory where it may or may not be tested, correct? Yes. And in this case, one of the ways to do that would have been document this cartridge case in its natural state, which was done, correct? Yes. And then as it was retrieved and placed into, what'd you say, a pillbox? Pillbox. That'd be one way to do it, right? That's not a yes or no. Yes, it would be a way to do. Yes, yes. And then at some point, that pillbox could be taken back to the evidence locker, and you would be able to take some photographs of that cartridge outside of the pillbox, right? Are you just saying I would be able to? Yeah, I mean, you could do that. Yes, if I wanted to, you could, yes. And that could be helpful in a case like this to see what it looked like in its natural state. Perhaps. You're not aware of any photographs that exist in that regard, are you? What I've testified is my awareness. You're not aware of any photographs that you haven't seen them with your own two eyes. Mr. Luttrell says this has been asked and answered 3 times. I object. Sustained. Thank you. Max, would you throw that up again? Or throw that map up? Max must be his AB guy or legal assistant counsel person. Let's talk about this particular crime scene. You talked a lot earlier about the scope and the kind of the geographical aspect of the crime scene, right? Yes. I'm going to have him pull that map up real quick, and we do have a few questions. This is States Exhibit 5. Am I right about that? Can you blow that up, please? That's 7, States Exhibit 7. Thank you. You want to come up here and take a look at this? The witness says yes. I don't think you've seen this particular map since it's been marked up. Yeah, I have not. So, just to kind of orient you, I think you're just as oriented as you probably need to be. Down here at the bottom is, well, up here is at the top is 300 north. You see that mark? Yes. And then the bridge would be right here. This would be the kind of north end of the bridge. Yes. And then the south end of the bridge, right? Yes. And earlier, when we were using this, forgive me, when the area where the bodies were found were generally, I believe, believed by the witness to be here. Would you agree with me? It's probably somewhere down in here, probably more to the right of the big circle, bottom right. Yes, because where the cemetery is, I think it's off just a little bit. It's the same general area. So the witness who marked it on there earlier must have been a little off in their location. I think it was who was it who found the bodies? It was Jake Johns or Patrick Brown, one of them. Okay. All right. A couple questions I have with regard to this. The Deer Creek shoreline, if you will, or the line of Deer Creek here on the north side. So that would be the side that the girls were found, right? Yes. Did you take any measurements in terms of the elevation changes from the bottom of that river up to the top of that incline? No. Okay. The reason why I'm asking is because you prepared that nice three-dimensional map, right? Yes. And that was one of the exhibits that was introduced earlier. I think it was the first and second exhibit that Mr. Luttrell introduced this morning. Yes. So there's no dimensions on there. There's no reference to elevation changes like 10 feet, 20 feet. Would you agree with that? I believe it has a distance scale. It's like a GIS map that was used. But in terms of the different elevations in different areas, it really doesn't demonstrate that, correct? That map? Yeah. I thought that was the purpose of the map. Well, I'm talking about in terms of the measurements, raw measurements, like how much elevation is, for example, the area behind the cemetery relative to where the creek runs. I'd have to look at it again to see if there's elevation. I thought this was a special or a spatial. Okay. Yeah, I think that's correct. You're not familiar with any specific numbers on the map, right? Let me hand you what's been marked as 19. I just want to make sure that's one of the three-dimensional maps that you. Yes, I need to look at the other one because this is the kind of the close-up. Okay, so 18. Is that? Yes, it looks like I can't read that. I'm sorry. I can't read that unless you have magnifying glasses. What are magnifying glasses? Like you wear them like a pair of glasses on your face? Um Anyway, sorry, that made me laugh. So I can't read that unless you had magnifying glasses, but you don't remember looking at this. The primary purpose of this map was just to have a kind of a black and white map that didn't have all the trees that are kind of distracting, just to show general areas. Okay, but as far as elevations, I don't need topographical maps. Okay, and so it's not really helpful in telling us whether or not there's a 10-foot incline or a 10-foot depression or anything like that, right? To my knowledge, no, I don't have any knowledge of that. So back to my question before, do you have any idea of what the elevation gain or if there would be elevation gain from the bottom of the creek near where the girls were found up to the bank? I did not take measurements. Okay, and would you agree with me that it varies in different locations along the creek line? It does, south of where the girls were found. It does. And you ultimately were used to go, you ultimately were asked to go out and do kind of a larger scale search, or at least you did do that, right? That's correct, yes. And I think you told us earlier, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but some of it was occurred down here on the private lane or around the private lane. Is that right? Did you mention that? He says, "May I approach?" Yes, you may. Mr. Rosie says, I'm sorry, Judge, may he approach? The court says, yes, he may. Uh, the witness says, the areas, is there a way you can zoom this up? Or, yeah, it doesn't have to be, I can see it. That's up to Max. We don't have the same capabilities they have. It's fine. No, you were saying you searched on the days. My areas were concentrated around this immediate area, this kind of floodplain area, and this, what I consider this kind of a floodplain area. I went to the High Bridge area, took those pictures in those states exhibits all the way down and then back. I don't have any memory of going over there. I think it was just to document this property was there. At the time, I didn't know it was there. Photographed that. Walked up this lane. I also looked, there's a grade in this area. We looked at that for any areas of slide offs or disturbed. I need to stop you for a second just so we have a clean record. Yes. You started by saying you searched the area fairly near where the bodies were located on the north side of the creek, right? Correct. And then you said you searched on what would be you'd call the north side of the high bridge, right here at the trail entrance of the bridge. Yes. And I have a memory of, I guess other individuals were searching the greater area. I have a memory of walking or trying to walk once this area, most everything is going to be the area my hand is on over this area, just kind of circled. South of the cemetery? Yes, and this then part, okay, confined to those areas and not much into there. As far as all this, I did not look there. So all this being kind of south of the high bridge into the private party, right? Correct. And I didn't look at anything that's to the upper left. Well, let me ask you a question. So, on the south side of the high bridge, and I'm kind of directing your attention to where the lane goes underneath the high bridge, the private drive, the bridge extends beyond the lane. Is that accurate? Yes, I said the lane goes underneath the bridge. Yeah, so you've got another, I don't know how much, but there's several more foot of the bridge before the bridge actually ends. It goes south, extends south, correct? Correct. So southeast, technically, I think, if we're really getting technical here, but you generally agree with that? Yes. Okay. And is it fair to say that at the end of the bridge, I think in maybe one of the photos, there's actually a barrier or there's some kind of gate that's erected there? Yes, it was in one of the photographs. I don't know. This could be that barrier there. I'm not sure. On the photograph, you're pointing just slightly south of where the lane goes? Yes, the red lane, the red lane. And do you agree with me that the rail lane, it's an old rail lane, right? Yes. The rail lane actually continues to extend south onto the private property. It's my understanding, yes. Okay, and they're really, if you were to continue to follow that as far as at least you went, there were really no elevation changes. You continued to maintain a basically level position. Is that right? In the immediate area of this path, where the after you get past the barriers onto the private property. I think it is basically stable. I'd have to look at my photographs and refresh my memory on that. Well, maybe some slight changes, but it's a rail line, right? It was. Yeah, it wasn't a focus of mine, but you can see from the map, it appears that you can see there the old rail line was, where the old rail line was. Okay. In other words, there's no large hills or anything that you can go down once you get off the bridge and off the trail, right? If you're on the trail, it seems to be generally flat. Okay, right. Like how hard, that was so difficult to get out of him. Can you zoom out some more for me, please? All right, I want to direct your attention to. Uh, Thank you for that. I want to direct your attention to the cemetery up here. I think you might have, is that where you said you parked? Yes. My assumption is, tell me if I'm wrong, that there were a number of law enforcement officials there parked in that area when you got there on the 14th. That's my memory. Yes. Okay. And when you got down into the wooded area, a fair amount of people, law enforcement officials down there, already waiting and working before you got there. Yes. Okay. Are you talking, help me out here. I haven't seen the photos. Are we talking 10, 20, 30? Give me some idea. I can't remember. I would say 10. Okay. And then there were, could be more. I don't know. All right. Well, I don't know either. I'm just trying to get some idea. Was the dive team already in the creek at that point? Yes, they were. Well, how many people are we talking about there? I don't know. I had some awareness of them. I saw them and they were in my photographs because when I start working, I'm focusing on CSI stuff and my immediate thing and anybody that's outside of that area, they were delegated tasks and I can't give you numbers. Okay, so you just don't know. You just know that they were there. You don't know the numbers. Yes. And there was more than one of them. Yes. There was a team. I think maybe that's the word that was used. Is that? Yes. Okay. All right. Are you generally familiar with the 300 North, this roadway that comes into the cemetery? Is that one of the routes you travel to get into the crime scene? I'm sure I did to get to the cemetery, but I'm not familiar with this area. I have worked scenes in Carroll County and Delphi, but it's so sporadic. I'm not local to this area. Okay, let me direct your attention here to this circle in the middle of this exhibit. Do you see here where there's like a little connector trail that comes from 300 North to the Monon High Trail? Yes. Are you familiar? We refer to that as kind of the Mears connector. Does that sound generally familiar to you or not? No. Okay. But you can see it here on the map, right? Yes. And do you see across this creek, there's basically a farmhouse and a farm. Okay. Does that look accurate based on what you're seeing here? Looks like a farm. Were you ever asked to go out and do any inspection of anything north of 300 at any point in time of this investigation? No. Not next to this farmhouse in the cornfield? No. Not behind it? No. Not in that particular area on that property? No. In the backyard or anything like that? No. Okay. What about up here on the top left? There's a circle here that's just to the right of the water hole across the highway. You see that circle? Yes. Does that look like it just ran along the Hoosier Heartland there? Yes. And were you ever asked to go out and do any kind of search or inspection of the area just to the east or the southeast of that road, whatever it was? He says no. Okay, I'm going to direct your attention to back to 300 North to the Mears connector. Do you see that again? Yes. Do you see this area, this strip here between the Monon High Trail and 300, which basically is a wooded strip that kind of runs right between them? Yes. Were you ever asked to go out and do any kind of search in that particular area for anything? No. This was in February of 2017, right? Correct. And we've seen some of the photos today, but would you generally agree with me that the visibility of that in that wood lot there were those girls were found was about as good as it's going to get any time of year because there's no foliage? Yes, with the foliage being down, yes. So that's the best visibility that time of year. I mean, we're just exercising a little common sense here, right? Yes, yeah. So I'm not off base then when I say that. So when I'm not off base when I say that, am I? No. And my view of it is just kind of from what I've seen from the photos is there isn't a lot of undergrowth in that area. Objection to his view of things, Your Honor. He can ask questions. Mr. Rosie says, I'll withdraw it. Sustained. He just said he will withdraw it. And then she's like, sustained. Screw you, bitch. Sorry. I hate Judge Cole. All right. So Mr. Rosie says, thank you. Do you agree that there was not a lot of undergrowth out in that woodlot near where those girls were found? I do. You agree with that? I said I do, yes. I'm sorry, I just couldn't maybe understand you. I'll speak up, he says. That's all right. And a lot of it is because there's kind of a high canopy there. The trees are big and there's just not much on the ground, right? It's February. There wasn't a lot of green and undergrowth. When you were up there at the cemetery, were you able to see down pretty close, maybe to the creek line from all the way up in the cemetery? I just don't have a memory of what it viewed like up there. Of what it viewed like up there? Weird way of saying it. I have memories of parking up there in the cars, but I mean, I walked up and down that hill several times, but I just can't remember. Okay. One other question that's similar to that concept. On the north side of that, strike that, let me direct your attention back to that private drive on the south side of the creek. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes. The one that goes under the bridge. Yes. And would you agree with me that when you're under that bridge, that drive kind of starts to incline up, back up the top level there where the home is located? Yes, towards the home? Yes. Yes, there is an incline. It's kind of a gradual incline that takes you up to the home. Yes. And so, as you're standing on that road, would you agree that you have a pretty good view of Deer Creek? I believe so. I mean, it's elevated, so it's almost like a kind of stadium view up there, or yes, I'm trying to remember my view from being the opposite side looking up, and I do remember being able to, from the distance I could see people on that road. Okay. And as you go up that lane, that actually to your left, which would technically be right in this direction, I believe, the creek gets closer and closer to the roadway, essentially, doesn't it? It's just way down below. Is that your recollection? Yes, near the home? Yes. Yeah. So like in this area here where the trees are a little darker. Yes. Pretty steep, maybe kind of sheer. Is that the word that you used earlier? It is. I didn't go down from the residence part, but especially the private side of the high bridge where it starts to turn up a little bit before it rounds. That whole area I remember looking at, and it was relatively sheer. It wasn't very wide, but it kind of went straight down. So when you're on that roadway, as you get closer to that home, you're able to see over in the area where the girls were located a little better because you're more elevated? Yeah, somewhat. And you're closer to the creek. You're not looking through all that other foliage, right? Yes. One second, Your Honor. Earlier, Mr. Luttrell offered up some exhibits that were taken from the south side of the bridge, which was from the east side of the south end of the bridge, where there was the slide and the leaves that were disturbed. You remember that? I do. And did you actually at any point try to traverse from the top of that bridge down to that private drive along that slide at any point, whether it was a week later? I did. Would you agree with me that gravel there is pretty loose gravel? I mean, it's gravel. I don't know how to. Well, did you slide when you went down? Did you have to kind of assist yourself, or did you just walk down casually? The gravel is more up where the walking trail is, and I don't remember there's any gravel in that side of that hill. Okay. It was like leaves and such. Well, do you remember the gravel being kind of loose up there? Maybe near the edge, the boundary area, but it's not like some strong memory I have. Was it your impression when you were out there that that area gets quite a bit of foot traffic from people using that trail? I don't know anything about the locals and the foot traffic up there. Okay, did you go down that private lane and ever walk or drive along that lane? It sounds like you did. I did, yes. Did you see the tree down there with all the shoes on it? All the shoes hanging from it? You didn't see it? I don't have a memory of that. Okay. I mean, if I did, I don't remember it. Did you ever talk to anybody to determine how much foot traffic or just traffic that area gets in general from people that are not living on that private property? I had. That was not my responsibilities. I didn't interview anybody in this case for that, for this type of information. So the answer is no. No. I don't have any further questions. Mr. Luttrell? Mr. Luttrell says, thank you, Your Honor. All right, so redirect for Sergeant Jason Page with the Indiana State Police. Mr. Luttrell asks, I'm going to hand you what is marked as State's Exhibit 182. Do you recognize that document? I do. And what is that? It's an attachment of one of our RMS reports of a Google Earth map. On this map, it says it was drawn by Sergeant Jim Cody. And who is Sergeant Jim Cody? He is now my lieutenant in the laboratory division, so he's currently the supervisor of all the CSIs in the lab division for the state police. And was he present on February 14th when you were there at the crime scene? He was. And was he the Sergeant Cody who did the 3D imaging that you utilized to do your diagram? He was. And does that contain coordinates on it in terms of the longitude, latitude? It does. Yes. And that appears to be a Google Earth generated document? Yes. I would move the admission of 182. Mr. Rosie says I have no objection. The state says all right, without objection, 182 is admitted. Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask leave of court to make copies for the jury for later. The court says yes, that would be fine. Mr. Luttrell says, but I would like to ask Sergeant Page, I will be pulling up another one of your photos, but at this time, would you just hold on to that for the jury? Hold that up for the jury. Again, this is the Google Earth document. State's Exhibit 182 is published. Would you point out the creek so that the jury can get it oriented to the exhibit? The creek goes from the right-hand edge of the paper, kind of lower center, and then curves upward to the upper left-hand corner of this piece of paper. And downstream would be which direction? The right side of the paper. Well, that's up. I'm sorry. It's flowing from upstream, is what I meant to say, going to the left side. And does this contain the areas in which you testified on cross exam? You covered both the north side of the creek and I guess what would basically be the south side of the creek north of the bridge, that floodplain area you described. You did a lot of examination of that area. I did. And did you, as Mr. Rosie asked you, there is a drop off there in that area on the end of the bridge down into the floodplain area. Is that correct? The drop off is from the county road. It's kind of like a sheer area, and then it levels off underneath the bridge. Did you, in your examination and covering that area, did you meander through there to where you could find, for want of a better word, an easier footpath or route from the access road to the location where you took those photographs from the creek standing on the rocks? Do you know which portion I'm talking about. Yes, I do. And did you find such a path of least resistance? I did. Did it take you a while to find it? Not really. Okay. And do you have any understanding of what type of distance that would mean you traveled on the access road below the bridge, following the path of least resistance to the area where you were standing on the rocks in the creek in your photo? Could you restate the question? I'm sorry. About as convoluted as I can give you. Do you have any idea the distance involved in that path from the access road to the location where you walked to the rocks in the stream? To that specific location, I can't recall that without looking at notes of measurements that we took. We took a wheel. I didn't. I believe it was one of the other CSIs. We have a rough sketch diagram and they mapped out different wheel locations. But to go specifically to where I was standing on the that rock location, I can't provide that answer without looking at my notes. Would you, by using, well, hang on a second. We'll go ahead and publish this. Would you come down here, please, Sergeant? Do you have a recollection of the route that you took that was across from the access road to the following through the floodplain area to get to the creek? To that location where I took the photos? Yes. It's difficult to see in this just from the shadows, but I think that rock location was kind of up in this area. Went down to the access road, this whole area here immediately adjacent and winding up that access road, which is labeled as Country Road 625 West, is steep. At least it's steeper than the hill it takes to get down to the access road. But when you depart at the center frame bottom of this exhibit down that hill area, crossing the access road underneath the bridge is relatively level, I presume because of the construction of the bridge. And then from that point, you can really enter anywhere into this area. You can see that there's trees, and that's going to prevent some movement and a lot of dead wood. And but if you wanted the path that day, it was kind of hugged the side of this drop off just on the other side of the 625 west, and then I got in that rock location so that I could make these photographs of the locations, just kind of walking straight across. Really, this whole area, it's not completely flat. There are trees down and dead wood, but this area is looks like a floodplain. Do you know today how much time it took you to walk once you discovered that route? How much time it took you to get your access to walk to the area of the creek approximately? I didn't know where I was going. I was just kind of looking for the path of least resistance so I could kind of document the area. Didn't take very long. All right, thank you. You may return to your seat. Do you happen to know the approximate width of that creek in the areas between the area of the creek that you were examining when you took the photograph of that creek? So I could create a simple diagram. The ones that I created earlier, I referenced the Google Earth document and others that have a distance scale on the bottom and measurements can be obtained from that. I thought it was, to my memory, approximately, was it 100 feet, I thought? Sergeant Page, let's go back to the question you were asked about scavenger and insects, how you have had cases where you utilized entomology and those who are experts in entomology, forensic entomology, to help you establish a timeline or get some information about when a death may have occurred. Is that correct? May I make a correction? Yes. I don't know if it was clear before either. I have used entomologists because there were bugs present, but it's been on maybe 4 or 5 occasions. But for the investigation itself, it was never actually used for time of death. In fact, the last time I never heard back from anybody, but we had other things like videos and cell phone datas that we use, but there were bugs there. I remember Brian Olahy even assisted me on one of the investigations and he called an entomologist to come. So they've been present, but I don't recall. Well, on February 14th, I'm sorry. No, 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 that's fine. February 14th, 2017, was there bug activity, insect activity going on that you noticed? Nothing overt that I recall. The ground zero area where the bodies were located and where the cartridge was ultimately found, who was in that area while you were present at the crime scene on February 14th? When the cartridge was located? Any time up into the time that the cartridge was located, who was present within the ground zero area that you described to the jury? From the immediate area of Ground Zero, the only people that were in that area was Brian Olahy, Dwayne Datzman, and myself until Jim Cody later came to the crime scene around 3 o'clock, 3:30, I believe, and did his scans of the scene, which took about an hour. I believe Jim Cody stayed until maybe an hour before we left the scene. The only other individual that I recall that came within Ground Zero was the coroner, J.D. Cree, when it came to the points to start moving the bodies. And Libby was moved first, is that correct? Her body was moved first? Yes. And that had the cartridge. The cartridge had been discovered prior to that, is that correct? Yes. Were you wearing gloves while you worked the scene inside the ground zero area? If I wasn't touching anything, many times I'm not, but when I get closer to the bodies, we take precautions and such. I don't actually recall or have any memories of moving the bodies or handling them other than documenting them. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's just I don't have a strong recollection of that. When swabs were being taken or items were being collected or bodies were being touched, was that by a gloved hand? Oh, I'm most certain it would be, but I don't have any memories of me being in that immediate area when that was happening. Okay. You did not. That was not your role on that day. I did not do that day. When the cartridge, you indicated that you, Sergeant Datzman, while you had alternative light source goggles, is that the correct word? Goggles? Yes, glasses, goggles. Glasses. When you were doing that, that's when he spoke up about him seeing something? Yes. And did he then look at the area that he had seen something more closely? That's my recollection, but you'd have to ask him. After his discovery, were you aware that those photographs that Mr. Rosie showed you, that they were in fact being taken? Yes. When Mr. Rosie asked you if it made sense to set the cartridge on a table and take a photograph, would that have served any forensic purpose other than looking at the markings on the bullet, the writing that's on the bottom of the bullet, any kind of, markings, disfigurement, whatever. Anything other than that? Would there be any purpose? He says, "No, other than just be more supplementary photography." Would that have given you any more information about the cartridge? No. Liar. Would that made the what made the most sense about how to handle that cartridge and where it should go once collected? Can I return to the previous question? Sure. Just to be clear, when I say no, I guess that I was thinking of is when you're asking about if I may use an example with fingerprint technology, photography. For fingerprints, I'll potentially photograph it, and we do it in high resolution so an examiner can look at it. And if we're successful in recovering the fingerprint and have it on a lift, those can be compared in addition. But as far as giving detailed scientific, when you say forensic, I think of like an analytical type of data to compare all those. Fine striations or tool marks. Our lenses don't have the capabilities of doing that. So when you ask that question, that's how I interpreted it. The cartridge was taken to the Indiana State Police laboratory for analysis by at least two different departments. Is that your understanding? I've been told they've been tested, but the details, I don't have any knowledge of that. Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have. The court says, okay, Mr. Rosie. The judge, thank you, Judge, says Mr. Rosie. And now we start recross. One of your primary jobs at a crime scene is to preserve as much information photographically as possible, right? Yes. But you would agree with me, you've seen a cartridge case before, right? Yes. One that has a bullet still attached to it. It's unfired. Yes. Would you generally agree that they all kind of look the same to the normal human? I mean, they look similar, yes. I mean, in this case, let's just get down to the business here. It's a Smith& Wesson 40 caliber cartridge case, right? Okay. Do you know that? Do you even know that as you sit here today? Do you know that? I know a cartridge case was collected. I know that it was a 40 caliber, but I did not examine this item. Okay. It is Smith& Wesson. Does that sound right? I don't know. I mean, did you read the head stamp on this photo? It was blurry. When you looked at the photo, it was blurry, but I have no reason to dispute what it is. So, and would you agree with me that I had a box of those 40 caliber rounds, that if I had a box of those 40 caliber rounds, they would all basically look the same? Yes. Okay. So documenting that round in its full state at that crime scene would assist us in making sure that the same round that might end up in this courtroom is the round that was pulled out of the ground, right? I think you're asking the wrong individual. I've testified that I had limited knowledge about this information. As far as supplementary pictures, it's completely at the discretion of the CSI. Okay, well, do you think it would be helpful to know that the round that was plucked out of the ground at the scene is the same round that's going to end up in a courtroom? Do you think that would be helpful generally? Yes. So you needed to do some kind of something so that you can photograph it and we can look at the bullet in real time and be like, oh, yeah, that's the same bullet. Whereas now it's just like a shiny piece of something in the ground and we can't differentiate anything about it. That's his idea of taking a photograph of it. And we know nothing more about what the bullet looked like or markings on it or deformities, any kind of anything that might help. Do you think that would be helpful generally? And he has to admit, yes. Okay, and documenting with a photograph the totality of that cartridge would be one way to assist in that process, right? It could be, yes. I mean, there's another end to that round that has the bullet is a totally different part of the cartridge, isn't it? Yes. There's a case and then there's a bullet at the end of it, right? Yes. And the some of those bullets are different colors, right? Yes. Or some could be copper, agreed? Yes. Some could be Teflon coated. Okay. Does that sound accurate? Yes. Okay. We don't know in this case what that bullet looked like at this point, at least because we haven't seen the photos, right? I mean, these are the photographs that you've been presented. Well, that's the cartridge there you can see, right? Yes, in the photograph. Can you see the bullet end of it? Can you? No. May I judge? The court says, yes, you may. Mr. Page, let me direct your attention back here to this oh, it's 120. Mr. Luttrell says 182. 182, sorry. Directing your attention back to 182, and there's this line here, this line that's got this 509-foot reference to it that would you agree, travels from southwest to northeast? Yes. in the photograph. And then this pin up here on the top right quadrant, this is basically ground zero. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay, so directing your attention to this area here between the line and then upstream to about parallel with where the pin meets the creek. Are you familiar with the area generally? Yes. Would you agree with me that the elevation change from the water to the ground level here is it's fairly level? Like there's not a rapid incline there? As I mentioned in previous states exhibits, there is an area that's kind of more of a gentle incline. Okay. And it's the path of least resistance, right? It does appear to be like that lighter section that you're pointing to, yes. But right here, right here, yes. Okay, it's just a more gentle slope into the water, right? Correct. Okay, the elevation changes over here would be much greater. It does. And I'm saying over here, farther upstream from ground zero. Yes, that's correct. Okay, and then did you ever take any measurements from the south side of the bridge on top where you saw that, the slide that we talked about earlier? Did you ever take any measurements from there down to the private drive? I believe somebody did. Did you? I did not. Okay, did you ever take any measurements from the private drive down to the bottom of the floodplain? Somebody did. I did not. Okay. You said you carry a Sig Sauer? I do now. State police, are those pretty common law enforcement guns? I believe they are, yes. Okay. I don't have anything further, Your Honor. Court says, does anybody on the jury have any questions? No response or indication from any juror. The court says, all right. Thank you, Sergeant. You may step down. You may call your next witness, which will be in the next stream. We will get to Dwayne Datsman. So we've heard his name several times, and we're going to get to him in the next episode. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure, if you have not done so already, to hit the like button. Make sure you are subscribed. Let me know in the comments below.